Hey guys, Infidel 1258 here. Today I want to talk to you about Flywheel, SPS price appreciation. I'm actually going to answer a question from the public live event that I held on the 22nd of September. And SS asked, I love SPS, I'm accumulating, but how is it going to go up because there's so much SPS inflation? And so we hear his question, and then I'm going to formulate it in a more sort of detailed way for my private members only live audience. And so this is a merging of two clips you're going to see together, and then you're going to hear me talk about how I see this playing out in the short to medium term. Like this is weeks or months away, in my opinion. And it's out of Land 1.5, so I'm super excited about this. If I'm wrong, it's because I'm misunderstanding or overestimating what land can do. I hope you'll stick around and listen to my thoughtful response and even some engagement with the members only audience so that you can hopefully formulate an idea and expectation around whether or not SPS is going to see flywheel and price spiking after 1.5 or not. Let's talk about it. Stick around, stay tuned. Have an amazing day, guys. God bless. SS says, Dwayne, I love the game and started playing 3 accounts before Chaos Legion. I've earned 40,000 SPS. If the bull market hits, I want to sell enough of my SPS to at least break even. That's so smart. SS, remember what you said here. Don't let the bull market and the excitement that will come in the next bull market rob you of that opportunity. You've got a plan. Focus on that plan. If that plan becomes a reality, don't let FOMO and excitement and when you reach the moon, don't start talking about Mars missions. Just take that profit, enjoy the ice cream, stay true to that plan. That's a great plan. And he goes on to say, I feel like tons of people probably feel like I do. So how will SPS truly rise? So much sell pressure. Such a great question. The question is about Flywheel. SS, this is a great conversation. There was a good question from a commenter named SS asking about how essentially how SPS can rise in price despite all the new creation of SPS and despite the sell pressure that exists out of the APR, because we got APR out the wazoo. We got liquidity pools producing SPS because these are paid in SPS. You got 27% APR on this one. You got 9% APR on that one. You got 9% APR on this one. So we got SPS coming out of here. And then we got SPS coming out of the game at 15% APR on the staking within the game. And then you got land rewards and license rewards and nightmare rewards, etc. Plus battle rewards. So like SPS on SPS on SPS. How are we going to see appreciation on this token? Because there's tons of new SPS being created and there isn't a need. There isn't a desire or a need for it that's commensurate with the new creation of supply. And I do believe that's true, at least for now. Then how do we ever see price appreciate? I mean, the long and the short of it is flywheel. So if we're talking about price appreciation in SPS, you guys know that there's 2 considerations, supply and demand. Supply is how many tokens are available. Demand is how many people want to buy those tokens. And if there's a plethora of tokens available, meaning there's lots of new SPS being created, lots of new hands are touching it, and they say like lots of the people are just getting it for free through one of those revenue streams I mentioned. Not free, but getting it through the normal course of their operations. Well, a good number of them are going to want to liquidate. And if they liquidate, what that means is that they're creating sell pressure. There's an excess of supply, and those people would like to get rid of it. That exceeds the buying pressure from the demand, from the players that want. So how do we drive demand? We have to either drive demand by creating new player base, which is a path that's possible, that's foreseeable. We could talk about that because it comes out of like Land 1.5 could excite new players. It's a totally different game mechanic. It might draw in new people. Draft mode tournaments could be an exciting new game mode that attract Magic the Gathering player base. And if so, that could be an exciting new way that we see new players and therefore new demand. SPS utility within like pack purchases could be another path. But I think ultimately it's going to come from a place not of demand creation, because we can't always, especially within a blockchain-based video game, we can't necessarily control the demand. I think we're going to see ebbs and flows on demand side. We're going to see spikes and falls, booms and busts, bull markets and bear markets that come because this is a crypto-based project. And that, to me, that means SPS price is going to, the demand around SPS is going to go ebb and flow, because I think all crypto goes through that. And so I don't want to try and manipulate the demand side. That would be a conversation around how can we excite and recruit new players. I think that's possible, but I don't even want to speculate on that. I think the path for us to think through SPS price appreciation comes entirely, or at least primarily, out of how do we control the supply of SPS. We already know that those income sources that I mentioned, the APR from staking, the land SPS production, the battle rewards, etc., those things are stable, they're done, they're established, and they're gonna come. So how can we control supply? Well, it's clear. It's not about how much we create. It's not about restricting how much we create. It's about creating deletion efforts and paths. This is the flywheel. The path is creating ways that the DEC is so desirable, people will burn their SPS for it. And that's where we start to see the conceivable deletion of substantive amounts of SPS so that the supply reduces in a way that the existing demand, forget about future demand and growth of demand, but the existing demand for SPS is greater than the supply. I think that's possible. I think that's conceivable. I think there's a real path to that through land 1.5. If you look at things like how they're going to, I'm going to try and pull it up quickly here. So we've got on land, we've got staking DEC. You need the amount of DEC that can go into a single plot of land is substantial. I think it might be 100. I think it's 50,000 for the monsters theoretically. So it's 50,000 plus you need a power source, which costs DEC. Plus you need to buy grain. If you can't make it, you need to buy it. And it's going to be 1 grain equals 1 DEC, at least when you're buying it from Splinterlands. Eventually we'll have a peer-to-peer marketplace, and that'll change how that cost works, but it's 1 DEC per grain, and that is deleted forever. And then you've got time crystals, and time crystals will help clear your plots of land. And 1 plot of land can be 1.5 million production points, or 150 time crystals, but every time crystal costs, I think, 100 DEC. Yes, it is 100 DEC. So I'm saying these are a few of the ways that land is either going to lock up or delete your DEC. And I think we already know that most of the DEC that exists is around 5 billion, 4.5 billion DEC. That alone is not enough to cover land, even just from a staking. But then you get into time crystals and grain sales and how those are extra costs, plus the 4.5 billion of DEC that exist aren't truly available. A lot of them are locked up in different things like liquidity pools, and those aren't going anywhere. Some of it is in these significant liquidity pools that I mentioned earlier. And so we've got 4.5 billion, but there really is 2.5, 3 billion that could be spent. Of those 2.5, 3 billion, that's not even close to enough to saturate the land. I think we're going to see about a 40% activation of plots of land, plus the grain sales, plus the time crystal sales, plus eventually there's going to be 50 new liquidity pools that come to Splinterlands. I think it's going to be in land 2.0. As land starts to be fully developed, you're going to produce more than just grain, research, or SPS. You're going to have options to produce wood or brick or salt, or what I mean. There'll be 50 different resources, and those resources will be utilized in different ways to produce other resources, second layer resources and third layer resources. And you'll have more and more sophisticated buildings that will have other DEC sinks that will allow you to produce those second order and third order resources. So there's a plan already in place that's already being unfolded, and it's already developed, but it's being unfolded right now. I think it's already been developed. I could be wrong about that. Technically, I think it's being developed still, but it's like this is already planned at least. And so this is the path that we will see liquidity pool being what we want it to do. This is where we will see SPS being deleted for DEC. And this is the way that we'll see DEC, we'll see SPS price spike, not out of a posture of, first and foremost, not out of a posture of player growth and demand growth, but first and foremost out of supply decrease. Interesting. And last point, if I'm right about everything I just said, what that would mean is supply decrease in SPS, which translates with a stable demand for SPS, is an increase in the price of SPS. And from that posture, as SPS doubles, triples, quintuples, 10x's in value, you then start seeing significant rank rewards for the game going from, instead of, 10 cents per win, maybe 70 cents per win, $1 per win. And that is where you could see a radical exponential growth in the player base. So the first part is not player base or demand. The first part is supply, reducing it through a mechanism that's already explainable, that's already anticipated, that's ready to launch or getting ready to launch. And then out of that, we should see SPS price increase. And out of that, we should attract new players. And then you get this tension where things could go really crazy and parabolic because we're reducing supply at the same time as we're increasing demand. That's where things could go wild. That's the conversation. And I'll make sure I post that for SS later. Kevin, good. Thanks for stopping by, buddy. Paul, good to see you. Paul, the only way is if SPL has to buy SPS to burn it for DEC. That means more players who are buying credits. Let me think that through. Are you saying that you are bearish on SPS price appreciation in the medium or even short term? Probably short term, yes. Medium term, you're bearish because you actually are saying you don't think the supply or the demand of SPS can be manipulated by our community in a way that would drive the price higher. What I think I'm reading you here is the only way SPS goes up is if the team starts buying it because they need to burn it for DEC so that they can exchange it for credits, which is another path that is definitely worth considering, but I don't think that's the only way, as I just alluded to. Okay, so Paul said, there is still a lot of SPS inflation daily. Absolutely, there's a crazy amount even. I would say there's a crazy amount. And I think there's gonna be for a long while. Probably the best way to say it. Yeah. So I agree with that point. There is a lot of SPS inflation. People don't need SPS since the SPS staking was instituted so people are selling a gain, causing the price to go down. Okay, so you're saying the demand is lower than the new creation. You're saying the demand is inadequate for the existing supply and the creation of new supply. I agree. That's why the price falls. Yes, I agree with that. But I guess I would add, you're talking about one of the two dimensions of why tokens have a price, or why the price is what it is for a given token. Again, you're talking about supply. There's too many being created. There's too many in our hands. There's too many sellers. That's all a question of supply. Because if there was if we cut the production in half, there would be a different supply and therefore a higher price because there's less. That's why this is the whole argument behind Bitcoin halving. People say the Bitcoin halving is going to improve the Bitcoin price because there'll be half as many Bitcoin tomorrow as there are today. And so that's going to increase the price. That's what I'm saying. If we could lower the production of SPS in some way, what would happen? We would see an increase in the SPS price. So that's the supply side. But the demand side is another component. And you talk about this in your next comment. You go, the new player experience and new fun game modes can be a catalyst for new players, which I think is what we needed. And you're in connection to your first point around SPS price. This is a topic around demand, because you're saying if we actually attract new players through a better and improved new player experience, then we could predictably expect there would be greater demand for SPS. So that's the demand side. You seem to focus primarily on the supply side. And I would say on that side, I think, again, Flywheel is the answer. The question around Flywheel, or let's say the critique, if I want to fight my own point, if I want to straw man if I want to strongman sort of your point, and I want to maybe defend my own point, because I'm saying the flywheel will cause a burning of SPS to access DEC for all the different reasons that we need DEC. And that will be a reduction of SPS that's substantial and substantive, that will affect the price of SPS in an upward way. And that alone is my main thesis for why SPS could go up now, whereas at 1.5 launches. But if I wanted to argue against my own point, I would have to say that one, we don't know if land is going to be the success that I hope it will be. I'm now expecting that land will launch, roughly 40% of the plot of land will be put to work, and that will substantially take up a lot of cards, a lot of DEC. Then there's time crystals and grain costs, etc. All of that will be more and more DEC. Eventually we're going to see 50 new liquidity pools that come out of land. That is a land 2.0 thing, I think. And so between here and the end of the year, or here and let's say the beginning of the first quarter, let's say the end of the first quarter from 2024, I think we do get to a place where land does what I'm thinking it's going to do. But I could imagine, if I'm being really skeptical, I could imagine maybe we have to wait until 2024 for the implications that I'm talking about, the flywheel considerations, to work in the way I expect. And that's a long way away. 6 months away is like, wow, especially with this market. I mean, it feels like, I mean, just the last week, the Fed met and they held the interest rates. They didn't raise them again. But I think they're pretty close to losing control of the market. I don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole, but everything from like overnight lending to bonds and the yields, corporate debt growth, private debt growth. There's just so many reasons to be really concerned about the future economy. And so 6 months is is forever away. And so if I want to be truly deeply skeptical about what I'm saying around flywheel, I think I have to come at it from a perspective. I don't know that land 1.5 is going to do what I think it's going to do. 30 to 40% activity rate, DEC being sunk substantially, SPS flywheel beginning to work. But if it does, if it works how I said it's going to work, I think what you see is two things. One, reduce in supply on SPS, which drives price higher, and that attracts new player base, which is like a vortex effect, because you got two positive benefits then. Like as we reduce once the flywheel does work, forget about when it works, but once the flywheel does eventually work, and I think eventually it will, this is what will happen. SPS will shrink in supply. That lack of supply will drive price higher. The increase in SPS price will attract new players, which creates new investors that have a need and a desire to speculate on SPS, which creates even more demand for the existing SPS and even more burn mechanics, because they want the DEC for the same reasons we do, to participate in land, to participate in liquidity pools. And so they're burning the SPS in the same way we are. And so it's this growth of burning, which is again a reduction in SPS, which is that's a vortex. Like it's like a growth in two ways: in the supply reduction, growing, the reduction happening faster and faster and faster for SPS, the burns of SPS happening more and more and more often, and the growth of the player base. And they could exponentially happen both at the same time. And if they both happen at the same time, and I think they will, and they almost must, that's where things get like stupid. But is that 6 months away? Is that Bitcoin halving and then some away? I don't know. And what between now and then could happen, because there's global economic concerns. There's, a US election. There's a ton of concerns between here and there. Kevin Winsborough. It's just a great time to stack SPS. When it reaches max 3 bill, the next growth will be massive. I'm with you, Kevin. And I would love to get more SPS. Paul says land is not going to be enough to get the peg. Rebellion has a shot along with ongoing land needs. Interesting. Most of my plots will have around 15k DEC on average. Let's take that number. If I go 150,000 plots times 40%, we get 60,000 plots that I think could be activated. And then we times it by 15,000 DEC. Right there that's 1 billion DEC. I think we probably have 2.5 billion DEC that could be utilized. There's actually 4.5 billion, but I think 2.5 billion could be utilized, and the others are going to be locked up in liquidity pools or they're just not being used, period. So that's a huge amount. That's an impacting amount of price movement. Like I'm saying, 1/3 of the total supply that is available could be used in land with just the sort of the number, the 15,000 PP, 15,000 DEC that you're mentioning. And then you're not talking, when you say 15,000, remember, Paul, you're talking about the staking element for your plot of land, but you're not talking about the power source. That's the cost. I think it's 5,000 DEC for a power source. You're also not talking about the grain expenses that many people will have to pay because they don't produce enough grain either this week or at some point in the future, because it's just going to be a complicated thing that mistakes will happen, and so people will buy grain for 1 DEC. That DEC is gone forever. And then there's time crystals, and I think some of the big SPS investors, the ones that want to farm SPS, are going to use time crystals to get their plots cleared as quickly as possible so that they can benefit from the disproportionate returns from SPS in the early going. I bet that's true. And that will be a cost that is paid in DEC and deleted forever. So it's not just this would be 900 million DEC from 60,000 plots, which is 40% of the activated plots, or 40% of the plots being activated, which I think is kind of going to happen. And your 15,000 number, which I think is, not overly excessive. So it's more than that, though, is my point, right? With the grain sales, with time crystal sales, with power cores, etc.